You're the practice kid. We got it right with your brother." The words landed in the center of the noisy retirement party like a shard of ice. Forks froze halfway to mouths. The cheerful chatter of 60 people celebrating my father's career sputtered and died. In the sudden ringing silence, the only sound was the clink of my mother's champagne flute against her teeth as she smiled, beaming at my brother Declan. She had just delivered the punchline of her toast, and she thought it was charming. A cute little family anecdote. My name is Ainsley Harper. At that moment, I was 30 years old, a partner at a top intellectual property law firm, and the person who had been secretly paying the mortgage on the very house in which we were all standing. They didn't know I was also the person who was about to burn their world to the ground. They just thought I was the practice kid. The dress rehearsal for the main event, Declan. If you've ever been the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who fixes things while someone else gets the credit, then you know the specific kind of invisibility I'm talking about. It's a slow-acting poison. If you've ever had to choose between your family and your own sanity, hit that like button because this story is for you. They thought I would just stand there and take it, absorb the humiliation with a tight smile like I always did. They were wrong. They didn't know that for the last 18 months I had been keeping score, and I had all the receipts. The pattern was established so early it felt less like a dynamic and more like a law of physics. Declan was the sun. I was a minor planet in his orbit, useful only for reflecting his light or being blamed for his eclipses. I was 5 when I learned this lesson in its purest form. I had saved my allowance for 3 months to buy a small, intricate snow globe of a ballerina. It was my most prized possession. I kept it on my nightstand, and every night I would shake it and watch the glitter settle around the dancer's serene pose. Declan, who was 7, wanted it. When I refused to give it to him, he threw a tantrum. My parents didn't punish him. They sat me down for a serious talk. "Ainsley, you need to learn to share," my father said, his voice laced with that weary disappointment he reserved just for me. "But it's mine," I whispered, clutching it to my chest. I bought it. "Family's more important than things," my mother added, her tone gentle but firm. "Giving your brother the snow globe would make him so happy. Don't you want your brother to be happy?" They framed it as a lesson in generosity, but it was a lesson in submission. I handed it over. Declan shook it once, got bored, and dropped it on the hardwood floor. It shattered. He laughed. When I started to cry, my mother sighed and said, "Ainsley, don't be so dramatic. It was just a toy." My tears were the inconvenience. My loss was the collateral damage of keeping Declan happy. That became the template for everything. When I was 16, I worked 40 hours a week all summer at a greasy diner to save up for my first car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a temperamental clutch. It was mine. I paid for the insurance, the gas, the oil changes. It was my freedom. Declan, 18 and already cycling through his second suspended license, was forbidden from driving it. One Friday night, while I was at a school football game, he took the keys from my room. He and his friends went joyriding and wrapped my Honda around a telephone pole. The police called our house at 2 a.m. I remember standing in the living room, the flashing blue and red lights painting stripes across the walls, my heart a cold, hard knot in my stomach. Declan was fine, just a few scratches. My car was totaled. My parents' first concern was Declan. Their second was the legal trouble. My totaled car was a distant third. In the days that followed, the story began to shift. It was my fault. I shouldn't have left the keys where he could find them. I should have known he was impulsive. I was the older sister. I should have been more responsible. My father actually said, "You practically dared him to take it, leaving it there." They hired an expensive lawyer for Declan to get his charges reduced. They bought him a brand new Jeep a month later to help him get back on his feet. Me? I took the bus to my diner job for the next 2 years to save up for another car. I never saw $1 of insurance money. They used it to cover Declan's legal fees. Every time I saw that gleaming black Jeep in our driveway, a monument to the family's priorities, something inside me grew a little colder, a little harder. College was the great divergence. I knew I was on my own. I applied for every scholarship I could find, wrote hundreds of essays, and stacked my academic record so high it was unimpeachable. I got a full ride to a prestigious university and then to a top-tier law school. I worked 3 jobs to cover my living expenses. I was a barista, a library assistant, and a tutor. I graduated summa cum laude from both. I was disciplined, focused, and perpetually exhausted. My parents barely acknowledged it. My achievements were simply expected, like the sun rising. They were my duty. Declan, meanwhile, enrolled in a local community college, attended for 3 semesters, and dropped out with a 1.7 GPA. This was not framed as a failure. It was framed as him being too creative for the confines of traditional education. He was an entrepreneur. His ventures were a series of half-baked, money-losing schemes. There was the artisanal beef jerky business that ended with a kitchen fire. There was the drop-shipping t-shirt company where he spent all the seed money on a logo and never ordered any shirts. There was the cryptocurrency he was developing. Each failure was cushioned by my parents. They paid off his debts, funded his next brilliant idea, and told everyone how proud they were of his fearless spirit. He lived in their basement, rent-free, his life a testament to unearned confidence and 0 consequences. The mortgage began 9 years ago. I had just made junior partner at my firm. My salary jumped into the stratosphere. I was 27. I went home for Christmas, and the mood was tense. My father had been laid off from his mid-level management job. He was 60, and his prospects were grim. They were terrified of losing the house I grew up in, the backdrop to every humiliation. My mother pulled me aside in the kitchen, her hands twisting a dish towel. "Ainsley, I don't know what we're going to do," she said, her voice cracking. "Your father is a proud man. This is killing him." The guilt was a physical thing, thick and suffocating. I was the successful one, the one with the resources. And despite everything, they were still my parents. The desire for their approval, for a moment of genuine recognition, was a deep, stupid ache that I couldn't get rid of. "I can help," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. "I can cover the mortgage for a few months until Dad finds something else." A few months turned into 9 years. $2,800 a month. Every month on the 1st, the money would transfer from my account to theirs. $302,400. I never missed a payment. They never offered to resume them, not even after my father started collecting his pension and took on a lucrative consulting gig. My contribution became an expectation, then an entitlement. It was never mentioned. It was the silent, foundational secret of the family's financial stability. In their minds, it wasn't a gift or a loan. It was my dues, the tax I paid for existing. While I was funding their lives, Declan was perfecting his role as the charming rogue. He had a natural charisma that I lacked, an easy confidence that came from never having to face the consequences of his own actions. People liked him. He could tell a great story, make a self-deprecating joke, and command a room. My success was quiet, built on thousands of solitary hours spent reading case law and drafting briefs. His was loud and performative, built on nothing at all. He was a house of cards, and our parents were the foundation, with my money as the mortar holding it all together. The first hint I had of Declan's more serious transgressions came about 2 years before the retirement party. A woman named Maria Sanchez contacted me through my firm's official website. Her email was frantic. She owned a small bakery, and she had received a terrifying letter from a law firm, Harper and Associates, accusing her of trademark infringement over the name of her signature cupcake. The letter demanded $5,000 to settle the matter out of court. It was aggressive, full of legal jargon, and deeply intimidating. At the bottom, it listed a bar association number, my bar association number. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. There was no Harper and Associates. It was just me. I called the woman immediately. She was crying, terrified of losing her business. I assured her the letter was fraudulent and that I would handle it. Then I confronted Declan. I found him in the basement playing video games. The room smelled of stale beer and desperation. I threw a copy of the letter on the table in front of him. "What is this, Declan?" My voice was shaking with a rage I rarely allowed myself to feel. He glanced at it and shrugged, not even pausing his game. "Oh, that? Just a little side hustle, helping people protect their brands. This is my bar number, Declan. This is fraud. This is extortion. This is a felony. You could go to prison, and I could lose my license. He finally looked at me, his eyes full of the familiar, dismissive arrogance. Relax. You're being dramatic. It's not a big deal. I just borrowed it. Besides, you're so successful. What's the worst that could happen? You get a slap on the wrist? I went to our parents. I laid out the evidence, the sheer criminality of it. I expected shock, horror, swift action. I got none of it. Declan is just trying to find his way, my mother said, wringing her hands. He's ambitious. Maybe he just went about it the wrong way. He committed a crime using my professional identity, I said, my voice dangerously low. He is extorting money from people. Don't use that word, my father snapped. He made a mistake. You're the lawyer, Ainsley. You fix things. So fix this. Quietly. We can't have a scandal. Think of the family. Think of what people would say. They weren't asking me to help Declan. They were telling me to erase his crime, to protect him, to bury my own violation for the sake of the family's image. My duty was not to justice, but to silence. So I cleaned it up. I used my own money to pay back Maria Sanchez and 2 other small business owners I found that he had targeted. I spent hours drafting legal waivers and non-disclosure agreements to ensure they would never speak of it. I told Declan in no uncertain terms that if he ever did anything like it again, I would report him myself. He laughed in my face. Sure you will, he said. He knew the family playbook better than I did. Ainsley cleans up the mess. Ainsley keeps the peace. Ainsley pays. But something changed in me that day. The stupid, hopeful part of me that still craved their approval began to die. I didn't stop paying the mortgage. That was too big a step, too final. But I started a new file on my encrypted personal server. I named it Contingency. I began to collect things. I hired a private investigator to track Declan's activities. It turned out my fix hadn't scared him at all. It had just made him smarter. He stopped using my bar number. Instead, he created more sophisticated fake legal documents, referencing non-existent statutes and citing real judges from unrelated cases to make his threats look more authentic. He was targeting more vulnerable people, recent immigrants running cash businesses, elderly people on fixed incomes. The investigator compiled a damning report, bank statements showing wire transfers from his victims into a secret account, audio recordings of Declan making threats over the phone, a detailed list of $89,000 he had successfully extorted over 18 months. I saved it all. Every receipt, every email, every recording. I stored it in the cloud, on a thumb drive I kept in a safe deposit box, and on a password-protected hard drive in my office. I didn't know when I would use it. I just knew the day would come. It was my insurance policy against my own family. The accumulation of grievances had become too heavy to bear without a weapon in reserve, which brings us back to the party. My father's retirement, the culmination of his 40-year career. I had helped plan the whole thing, of course. I coordinated with the caterers, designed the invitations, and paid the $5,000 deposit on the venue, a historic inn with manicured gardens. My parents took all the credit. The air was thick with false sentimentality. Colleagues gave speeches full of polite cliches. Cousins I hadn't seen in years complimented the canapes. I stood near the back, a ghost at my own feast, watching my family perform the play they'd been rehearsing for 30 years, the wonderful, successful Harpers. Then my mother picked up the champagne flute to give her toast. She spoke about my father's dedication, his long hours. Then she turned her attention to her children. And of course, she said, her voice swelling with emotion, we couldn't have done any of this without our wonderful children. Ainsley, so steady and reliable. She gave me a brief, dismissive nod. It was the kind of praise you give a sturdy appliance. Then she turned to Declan, and her entire being lit up. Her smile was radiant. But our real success, our greatest achievement, is our son, Declan. She reached out and took his hand. He preened, puffing out his chest. He has the artist's soul, the entrepreneur's fire. He reminds me so much of your father in his youth. He's the one who's going to change the world. She raised her glass high. To Declan. A few people in the room, friends of mine who knew the real story, looked at me with pity. But most of the room just smiled and raised their glasses. It was then that a distant cousin, half drunk on champagne, shouted out, "What about Ainsley? She's the big-shot lawyer." My mother laughed, a light, tinkling sound that grated on my raw nerves. She looked at me, a patronizing glint in her eye, and delivered the line that would detonate my life. "Oh, Ainsley," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "We're so proud of her, of course. But you know how it is with the first one. You're the practice kid. We got it right with your brother." The room went dead silent. Something inside me snapped. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a clean, quiet break. It was the sound of a 30-year-old chain forged from guilt and hope and duty, finally giving way. The desperate need for their love, for their approval, for a single crumb of genuine recognition, it all just vanished. In its place was a profound, liberating coldness. It was clarity. I finally saw them not as my parents, but as they were. Two deeply flawed people who had chosen a favorite and scapegoated their daughter to build his pedestal. And I saw Declan for what he was. A parasite. Enabled his entire life, who saw other people, including me, as nothing more than resources to be exploited. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply placed my untouched glass of champagne on a passing waiter's tray. I met my mother's smiling, oblivious gaze. I held it for a long moment, letting her see the absolute emptiness there. Then I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't look back. The door closed softly behind me. No slam. Just the quiet click of the lock engaging. The night air was cold and sharp. It felt clean. As I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone. It took me less than 30 seconds. I logged into my bank account, found the recurring monthly payment of $2,800 to my parents, and I deleted it. A small digital act of annihilation. A confirmation message popped up. Your payment has been canceled. I had never felt so light. The drive home was calm. There was no internal debate, no second guessing. The part of me that used to agonize over their feelings was gone. The only thing I felt was a grim, focused sense of purpose. When I got to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked straight to my home office, powered on my computer, and opened the contingency file. Everything was there. The investigator's full report. Scanned copies of the fraudulent letters Declan had sent. Bank records. The sworn and notarized affidavits from 3 of his victims who were willing to testify. The audio files. It was a perfect, airtight case for wire fraud, extortion, and the unlicensed practice of law. I spent an hour drafting an email. My tone was not emotional. It was factual, clinical, and utterly damning. I attached the key files, zipped and encrypted. The recipient was not the local police. I knew that would get bogged down in small-town politics. I sent it to the head of the Economic Crimes Unit at the nearest FBI field office, whose contact information I had acquired for just this eventuality. I also CC'd the State Bar's disciplinary committee. I was burning the whole thing down, and I was using jet fuel. The subject line was simple. Evidence of ongoing federal wire fraud and extortion scheme. I hit send at 1:17 a.m. Then I went to bed and slept for 8 uninterrupted hours, more deeply than I had in years. The fallout didn't begin for another month. The first of the month came and went. On the 3rd, my mother called. "Ainsley? Hi, honey. A strange thing happened. The mortgage payment didn't come through. Did you forget?" Her voice was casual, but with a brittle edge. "No," I said. "I didn't forget." A pause. "Oh, is there a problem with the bank?" "No, there's no problem with the bank." The silence stretched. I could hear her breathing, the slow dawning that this was not an oversight. "Well, what is it then?" "We're going to get a late fee, Ainsley. You know how your father worries." "That sounds like a personal problem," I said, my voice as calm and flat as a frozen lake. "Ainsley, what has gotten into you? After everything we've done for you, this is how you treat us? We need that money." The victimhood was instantaneous. "No," I corrected her. "You want that money. You haven't needed it for at least 5 years. And to answer your first question, I canceled the payment. Permanently." "You what? Why? Is this about that silly joke I made at the party?" "Oh, you're being so sensitive. It was a toast, for heaven's sake. We're family." "Where's your apology?" I asked. "Not for me." I was done needing that. I asked just to watch her fail the test. "Where is your apology for 30 years of treating me like an afterthought?" She sputtered. "Apology? I have nothing to apologize for. You are being dramatic and ungrateful. You're making this all about you." Goodbye, Mother, I said, and I hung up. Declan called 10 minutes later. He didn't bother with pleasantries. What the hell is your problem? He snarled. You're going to cut them off? You know Mom and Dad can't afford that house without you? Then I guess they'll have to sell it, I said. Or maybe you could get a job and contribute. He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You think you're so smart with your fancy job and your big apartment? You've always looked down on me. You'll regret this, Ainsley. I'll make you regret this. Is that a threat, Declan? I asked, my voice laced with ice. You should be very, very careful about the words you use from now on. I hung up before he could respond. 2 days later, they showed up at my apartment building. My doorman, a kind man named George, called up. Miss Harper, your parents and brother are in the lobby. They're rather insistent. Thank you, George. Don't let them up. I'll be right down. I met them on the front steps of the building. It was a cold, gray afternoon. They looked smaller, less imposing, out of the context of their home. My mother's face was blotchy from crying. My father looked furious and impotent. Declan vibrated with rage. Ainsley, we need to talk about this, my mother began, her voice trembling. You can't just do this to us. I can, I said. And I have. There's nothing to talk about. We're your family, my father boomed. You have a responsibility. My only responsibility is to myself, I replied. A responsibility I have neglected for far too long. I am done setting myself on fire to keep you warm. Declan stepped forward, his face inches from mine. You're a cold-hearted bitch. I didn't flinch. I looked past him, at my parents. I paid your mortgage for 9 years. I cleaned up his messes. I bought the peace in this family with my money and my silence. The price is now too high. I'm done. My mother started to sob, the performative, manipulative tears I knew so well. What will people think? This will destroy us. You should have thought of that sooner, I said. I turned and walked back into the lobby without another word. I didn't look back to see them standing on the cold pavement. The barrage came next. Dozens of texts a day. Voicemails that ranged from screaming tirades to pitiful begging. Emails from aunts and uncles, the flying monkeys dispatched to tell me I was tearing the family apart. I read none of them. I created a filter that sent anything from their numbers or email addresses directly to a folder I named Evidence B. 2 weeks after that confrontation, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, from Washington, D.C. It was Special Agent Miller from the FBI. Miss Harper, he said, his voice professional and brisk. We've reviewed the information you sent us. The evidence is substantial. We'll be moving forward. A warrant has been issued for your brother's arrest. I felt nothing. No triumph, no regret. Just the quiet satisfaction of a complex legal brief finally being filed. Thank you for letting me know, Agent Miller. I will make myself available for any further questions. They arrested Declan the next morning. It was a quiet affair. 2 agents in suits knocking on my parents' front door at 6 a.m. They took him away in an unmarked car. The news hit the local paper the next day. The charges were serious. Multiple counts of wire fraud and extortion. The detail about him using his sister's, a prominent attorney's bar number initially, was the salacious detail that made the story spread. The family's carefully constructed image shattered in an instant. The calls and texts became hysterical. My parents accused me of destroying Declan's life, of betraying my own blood. They left long, rambling messages about how he was a good boy who just made a few mistakes. They never once acknowledged his victims. They never once acknowledged what he had done to me. I responded once. Not to them, but through my own lawyer. I had a colleague send them a formal cease and desist letter, ordering them to stop all contact. It was printed on our firm's letterhead. It was legally unimpeachable. The irony was bitter, and it was beautiful. After that, the blocking ritual began. I went through my phone and blocked every number associated with them. I scrubbed my social media, unfriending and blocking dozens of relatives. I deleted the years of emails, the photos, the digital ghosts of a family that had never really been mine. It felt like a deep, cleansing fire. The legal process ground on. Declan, faced with the mountain of evidence I had provided, had no choice but to take a plea deal. The judge was not lenient. The fact that he had preyed on vulnerable people and stolen the professional identity of his own sister weighed heavily against him. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. My parents were forced to sell the house. Without my $2,800 a month, they couldn't afford the upkeep and property taxes. They downsized to a small, grim apartment in a town an hour away. Their social circle evaporated. The shame was too great. The story of what Declan did and what I did in response became a local cautionary tale. They were isolated, left with nothing but each other and the golden child they had ruined with their indulgence. I never gloated. I never celebrated. Their downfall was not my victory. My victory was the peace that followed. It's been 2 years now. My life is quiet. I moved to a new apartment, a corner unit with huge windows that let in the morning sun. The silence that used to feel like loneliness now feels like serenity. I adopted a dog, a scruffy terrier mix named Gus, who now snores softly at my feet as I write this. I have friends who respect me. I have a career that fulfills me. The heavy, suffocating weight of my family's expectations is gone. I can finally breathe. Sometimes I think about that little girl with the shattered snow globe. I think about the teenager who took the bus in the rain. I think about the young woman who wrote check after check, hoping to buy a love that was never for sale. I'm not her anymore. I am the architect of my own life, the enforcer of my own boundaries. I had to amputate a part of my life to save the whole, and I have no regrets. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Family is not an excuse for cruelty, and respect is not a birthright. It is earned. If you've ever been made to feel small so someone else could feel big, know this. You hold the power. You can stop paying the emotional mortgage. You can walk out of the party. You can choose yourself. I chose myself, and I never ever looked back.